Beyond identity theft, hackers gain access to sensitive information on millions of federal workers. Message of peace. Pope Francis visits ethnically mixed Bosnia tomorrow, fostering unity. Help is on the way. The Society of St. Vincent DePaul comes to the aid of flood victims. And American printing history, a prayer book, the first book printed in the New World. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Friday, June 5th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. China disputes allegations tonight that it played a role in what could be the largest breach of government computer networks in the U.S. Investigators believe the hack affected millions of current and former federal employees. Wyatt Goolsby has the latest tonight.
Tonight, the U.S. government is struggling to assess the damage. Officials revealing possibly the biggest cyber attack on the U.S. government ever breached their critical computer networks. Two distinct attacks crept into the federal system, sophisticated and undetectable for months, all the while stealing information from the databases of virtually every government agency. Sensitive information from up to 4 million current and former federal employees now in the hands of hackers, including employees at the Department of Defense, the Social Security Administration, and even potentially President Obama. Officials say there could be millions more.
These networks are so vast, they are really geographically dispersed. They're very, very difficult to be able to protect. And the reality of it is you can't prevent these attacks.
The suspect, according to authorities, a cyber superpower, the People's Republic of China. According to officials, evidence points to hackers working for the Chinese military, who may be compiling a massive database of critical information on Americans. Now federal employees being cautioned to check their bank statements and get updated credit reports.
We continue to update our security, but it is a pretty significant challenge.
Hackers have targeted the American government before. Just this week, investigators say Russia attacked the IRS and made 100,000 tax returns vulnerable to criminals. Wyatt Goolsby, EWTN News Nightly.
And some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. Pope Francis heads to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia-Herzegovina, tomorrow. He bears a message of reconciliation to a country divided along religious and ethnic lines. It's been 2 decades since the civil war there ended, but tensions remain. Many Bosnians are Muslims, the Serbs are mainly Orthodox, and the Croats largely Catholic. Bosnian authorities see the papal visit as an opportunity toward bridging these ethnic divides.
I want a peace between Muslims and other religion, and that's it. I want to stop war.
Some Bosnians say Francis is popular with different ethnic groups because he shows concern for the marginalized. A key Muslim figure in Bosnia says the main challenge for religious communities there is building mutual trust. Ifet Mustafik spoke this week with our news partner, the Catholic News Agency, about those challenges. Mustafik heads an Islamic community's interreligious relations office in Bosnia-Herzegovina. He is part of the Muslim delegation that will meet with Pope Francis in Sarajevo tomorrow.
People are talking about the victims, about the people who died, about the properties that were destroyed, but people are not talking about the trust that was also a victim of the war.
Mustafik says Muslims expect the Pope to, quote, encourage the path we are carrying forward within dialogue. He was also there when St. John Paul II visited Bosnia in 1997. Well, September visitors to Philadelphia will get to see treasured art from the Vatican. An exhibit called Vatican Splendors opens September 19th. That's 1 week before the Pope arrives. It includes artwork by Michelangelo, embroidered silk vestments, and relics from Saints Peter and Paul. Pope Francis closes the World Meeting of Families in Philly with an outdoor mass in late September. The Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, now facing criminal charges for allegedly mishandling clergy sex abuse claims. The 6 counts allege the Archdiocese failed to protect children. Those charges stem from a case in which church leaders are accused of not reporting abuse allegations. The priest involved pled guilty in 2012. He is now serving 5 years in prison. Some people in Arkansas are ordered to leave their homes as floodwaters threaten those homes. A levee along the Red River may not hold as the water rises. Emergency workers went door to door last night, delivering the evacuation order. Recent heavy rains in Texas and Oklahoma have triggered sharp rises on the Red River. At least 31 people have been killed in storms that began in that region over the Memorial Day weekend. Joining us from Alabama by Skype, Elizabeth Disco-Shearer, the Disaster Division of the Society of St. Vincent DePaul. I know you're on your way to the flood zone in Oklahoma and Texas. What is the scope of the damage there?
The damage is intense. It's epic flooding from Brownsville, Texas, all the way up to Tulsa, Oklahoma. In Texas alone, 167 counties out of 254 counties have some type of infrastructure damage. Some areas saw as much as 10 inches of rain within a 24-hour period.
What are the most immediate needs of the flood victims?
Right now, we need funding to purchase gift cards for families because we're doing immediate response. We're helping them with food, with fuel, with prescription assistance. Long term, we need funding for our House in the Box program, which will furnish the inside of everything that the families have lost, from bedrooms to bathroom items to kitchen items.
Explain a little bit the House in the Box and how people can contribute to that.
If people would like to contribute, they can sponsor a family for $1,500. It's a very tangible way to make a difference, and they can go to our website at svdpusa.org, and there's a button they can click on to donate.
So House in the Box is basically all the things that people need to replace things that have been lost?
Yes, and we've been using it since Hurricane Katrina. It's been a very successful national program for us, and we've used it across the United States.
What are some of the things included in that box?
A family of 4, for example, each family member would get a new bed. They would get linens. There's dish towels. There's pots and pans. There's utensils, a bathroom, everything that they need. And we also additionally usually provide a gift card for incidentals that aren't provided in the House in the Box. It's scalable. We can do it for a family of 1 to a family of 12.
And finally, with St. Vincent de Paul being a Catholic organization, isn't this really one of the works of mercy that we're talking about here?
Yes, it is. And I always say to people say your job is intense because right now we're dealing with disasters in 12 states across the United States. But I tell them, no, it's great because I get to live my faith daily.
A beautiful way to look at it, and we appreciate you joining us. Elizabeth Disco-Shearer with the Society of St. Vincent de Paul. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And salvage crews complete an elaborate operation of uprighting a capsized river cruise ship in China. This after hope fades for finding survivors among the hundreds who were trapped inside. Crews used huge cranes to flip the battered Blue Eastern Star cruise ship. Divers have recovered the bodies of at least 103 victims in the Yangtze River. At least 456 passengers and crews were on board that vessel. It overturned in a powerful storm Monday night. Only 14 people survived. Barnard College, an elite women's college in New York City, says it will now accept transgender women. This means applicants who, quote, consistently live and identify as women regardless of gender, end quote, may be admitted. Barnard's president told the New York Times that decision came after more than a year of discussions. Transgender men who were born female will not be able to apply for admission there. Those women who transition to men while already enrolled are not affected by this new policy. Joining us from Princeton, New Jersey by Skype, chair of the American Principles Project, Sean Fieler. Sean, you wrote an article recently, What Republicans Should Learn from the Transgender Moment. What do you mean by that moment, and how is this a political issue?
Well, this moment is, it's really a cultural moment more so than a political one, where we as a society are wrestling with the idea of whether or not we want to accept that people exist independently of their bodies, as really the transgendered community is claiming we should. And it is political. It's been made political, I think, by the transgender community and by the political implications of this.
So what do you think Republicans need to do to advance their argument referring to this particular situation?
Well, I think they have to engage the argument at a level of principle. And I really think for the last 12 years since Lawrence v. Texas, we haven't. Justice Scalia, Senator Santorum at the time, tried to make the case on principle. They were derided. The party for 12 years has tried to avoid principled arguments about human sexuality, and that's really, I think, underlies the series of defeats that we've suffered for 12 years.
In your article, you quoted Pope Benedict XVI. What about?
So Pope Benedict made, this is 2.5 years ago, the case that if we try to create ourselves in a way that denies our Creator, God, that we undermine our God-given dignity. So by denying our Creator, creating ourselves, saying that we're men if God created us women, or vice versa, we deny our humanity, we deny that we were created in the image and likeness of God, and we deny our God-given dignity. And that's a slippery slope that we don't want to go down.
So we're basically undermining the rights that we cherish if we fail to see that they are God-given rights and that God has created us.
I think this goes to the heart of what America is about. If you look back at our unalienable rights that are given to us by our Creator, that underpin really the American experiment, but also obviously it goes to the heart of Christianity. And so I think this is a moment that needs to be challenged on its principle. Really, the transgender community is making a metaphysical claim that we can't ignore.
All right, from the American Principles Project, Sean Fieler, thanks for being with us, Sean.
Thank you very much.
And the first book printed in what is now the United States wasn't a work of fiction. It wasn't a biography. It was a prayer book. Jason Calvi turns this intriguing page of American history for us tonight.
A new exhibit at the Library of Congress features an original Declaration of Independence and other colonial works. But they're not the headliners. These twins are. 2 copies of the first English book printed in the New World in 1640. The Book of Psalms were translated into English for singing during the liturgy. It's known as the Bay Psalm Book.
They're in the wilderness of Massachusetts. And the fact that their religion and their need to preserve that religion is so strong that they actually print this book, I think is a phenomenal opening moment for American printing.
The exhibit tells the story of that early history. Here's the first complete Bible printed in the Western Hemisphere, the Eliot Indian Bible of the 1660s.
It's a very important contribution on the part of Eliot to transcribe the Bible into what was only a spoken language. So he's put Algonquin on the page.
The exhibit walks you through the history of printing in the colonies leading up to the Declaration of Independence. This one behind me is one of 26 of the originals still around.
The electricity of the announcement spreads through the colonies. And it's because you've all gotten on horseback with your copy. You stop in every town. It's read from the steps of the courthouse. Somebody writes it down. You get back on your horse and you go.
It's a story of American Revolution in printing. And the first chapter begins with a Book of Psalms. In Washington, Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Coming up, Pope Francis discusses challenges facing Latin America with Chile's president. And a Texas medical team performs another first, a partial skull and scalp transplant. June 5th, the Feast of St. Boniface, the Apostle to Germany. It's good to have you with us. Thank God for Friday, and thank God for each of you. Ahead of tomorrow's trip to Bosnia, Pope Francis meets today with the President of Chile at the Vatican. Alan Holdren joins us from Rome. And what did the Holy Father and the Chilean President discuss, Alan?
Brian, President Michelle Bachelet and the Holy Father spoke for more than 45 minutes in their native Spanish, so they're sure to have spoken about a lot. We know from a press office bulletin that came out afterwards that they spoke in particular about the role of the Catholic Church there in Chile. They spoke about the protection of human life. They spoke about challenges that face Latin America as a whole. The issue of protection of life in particular is one of popular interest there in Chile, now that as of January, President Bachelet has legalized abortion there in Chile.
Being from Argentina, I'm sure the Holy Father and this Chilean president have a good deal in common, especially when it comes to the issues facing Latin America.
That's right, Brian. The Pope often has Latin American presidents come through. Bachelet and he have met here just today. He's got another 2 meetings with Latin American presidents set for this Sunday. That's after he comes back from Bosnia on Saturday. He's going to have plenty to do. He likes to keep up to date with these people. He also often speaks with people that he worked with back in Argentina over the telephone and by written correspondence. He has a good finger on the pulse of what's going on in Latin America today.
Also, the women in white were there in the Vatican today. What is the message they're sharing?
That's right, Brian. They were meeting here just right behind me, protesting peaceably against abortion. These are women who have united, the mujeres en blanco, women in white, against abortion. They want to reverse this law that President Bachelet passed in January. And as of February, they've been showing up spontaneously. They're in front of the presidential palace. This is the first time they've been here at the Vatican. They want to stop abortion in Chile.
From Rome, our correspondent Alan Holdren. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Brian.
And doctors in Houston reach an amazing medical milestone. MD Anderson Cancer Center and the Houston Methodist Hospital announced this week the world's first partial skull and scalp transplant. Checking email and Facebook messages filled with well wishes for Jim Bosen, who is leaving Houston Methodist Hospital with a new kidney and pancreas, as well as a new scalp and skull.
This is the first, as far as we know, this is the first transplantation of the scalp and skull, period.
Bosen underwent a 15-hour operation by about a dozen doctors and 40 other health workers delicately.
This is a microsurgical procedure, and to get the bone and the scalp tissue to survive in the new location, you have to connect blood vessels under a microscope with little stitches about half the diameter of a human hair.
For Bosen, a 55-year-old software engineer from Austin, Texas, it's been a long road.
I was a type 1 diabetic since age 5 and did okay with that up until about high school. Maybe you started developing some kidney problems and they got that under control.
But Bosen eventually suffered renal failure and received a kidney pancreas transplant in 1992. He later developed a rare form of cancer that targeted the smooth muscle under his scalp.
And I had 3 tumors removed, and because of which involved radiation, and 3 skin grafts done on the scalp, and the 3rd skin graft was rather deep and didn't really take.
The open wound on Bosen's head presented a problem for doctors.
We wouldn't probably ordinarily transplant a scalp, but the trick here was that Mr. Bosen was going to receive a kidney and pancreas transplant anyway, and he would have these medications which would protect his scalp and skull from his body's rejection.
Bosen's scalp and skull transplant joins a growing list of firsts in medicine, including face, hand, and even womb transplants.
With appropriate planning, good collaboration, team building, the miracle of organ donation, you can actually break a barrier for patients and actually achieve something that wasn't possible before.
And maybe even a silver lining.
Well, I didn't have this much hair, so it looks better.
Bosen will remain in Houston for 2 to 3 weeks for follow-up care. Up next, the arguments for and against the so-called right to die as California takes a step closer to legalizing euthanasia. Plus, one more look at this week's beautiful Corpus Christi celebration in Rome. On Friday evening, June 5th, I'm Brian Patrick with our EWTN News Nightly team. Thanks for joining us. California lawmakers advance a bill toward what many Catholics see as assisted suicide. Katherine Szeltner is here with more tonight.
Brian, California's Senate passed a bill last night that would allow terminally ill patients to end their life under a doctor's care. The bill gains national attention after a so-called right to die advocate took to the media in support before ending her own life.
C.S. Lewis does talk in his book, the problem with pain is it's part of life.
In a 23-14 vote, California's state Senate moves forward a bill that would expand aid in dying laws. 2 major backers included the parents of Brittany Maynard. 29-year-old Maynard became a media darling after she announced she was going to end her life following a brain cancer diagnosis.
I can't even tell you the amount of relief that it provides me to know that I don't have to die the way that it's been described to me that my brain tumor would take me on its own.
Maynard moved from California to Oregon, one of 4 states with expansive physician-assisted suicide laws. She took doctor-prescribed lethal drugs and died on November 2nd, All Souls Day. Archbishop Jose Gomez of Los Angeles spoke out when Maynard's story had peak national attention, reminding us God's plan sometimes includes suffering. He wrote, "Through our kindness and care, we can help those who suffer believe in heaven. we can show them that when they breathe their last breath, God will be there too. One woman with her eyes on heaven is Christina Sand. Like Maynard, Sand was also diagnosed with a form of brain cancer. A Catholic wife and mother, Sand says she wants to follow God's plan.
There's a meaning in suffering. Christ died for us, and that was our way to salvation.
California's Right to Die measure will now go to the state assembly and, if passed, on to the governor. Democrat Governor Jerry Brown, a former Jesuit seminarian, has not yet commented on the pending legislation. Brian.
Thank you, Katherine. Arina Grossu is director of the Center for Human Dignity at the Family Research Council. And Arina, how does this bill really endanger vulnerable populations?
Well, it institutionalizes suicide, and it betrays the medical profession, which is supposed to heal, not kill people. And it will go from consent and dealing with terminally ill patients to not having consent and not terminally ill patients. So people with chronic conditions, children, people who are sick, people with disabilities, and it puts all of them in danger. It is a slippery slope. And what are some of the other issues at play here? Well, you'll have the possibility for elder abuse and coercion, whether from family members, as well as the person, him or herself, who feels that maybe they're a burden. And so we have to help people see that their lives are worth living, that they have value despite the illness, and that they can overcome whatever suffering that comes with an illness. We saw a little bit of Brittany Maynard's story. What role did that play in this decision, do you think? There's a lot of emotion there, especially because she was young and beautiful. We have to look at everyone who would be affected and the fact that lives would be held in balance if this passes in the Assembly. And so we have to look at what this does, and it is legitimizing the killing, the suicide of people. It's very disturbing. Are there any steps that we can take to keep this bill from becoming law in California and in other states? Right now we have to focus on California. That's really important. Once we know where it goes and what committee it goes, we need to contact those committee members and let them know our opposition to it. We have to do prayer rallies, go on the streets, and really make people understand that assisted suicide is very, very dangerous and it's going to endanger all of our lives. And let's call it what it is, assisted suicide versus right to die. Arina Gross, Director of Center for Human Dignity at the Family Research Council. It's good to have you back. Thanks. Thank you. Well, a unique piano brings peace to its players in a very troubled neighborhood. This public piano in crime-ridden Camden, New Jersey encourages people to share their gift of music with others. For some, it's an oasis from the hardships of life.
This is my, I could say, hobby. It spiritually lifts me to come out here and play the keyboard and just relax, you know.
The street piano is part of a project to bring life to underused public places in Camden. Well, until Monday, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Ahead of Sunday's Solemnity of the Body and Blood of Christ, we leave you tonight with this week's Eucharistic celebration on the traditional feast observed in Rome. Good night and God bless you.
Amen.